John, let me go ahead and bring you up here for a minute here. Somebody made the comment that sounds like a Baptist preacher, and I don't know. I think it's what a Baptist preacher ought to be talking about, and they're not, are they?
No, but that's just one person who hasn't really listened. Once you listen some more, you'll see that it's not religion at all. It's
all right, I will keep it going.
A few more minutes.
But just what I've heard described so far certainly sounds like the advent of Planet X, or a celestial body. But here, we'll go ahead and listen to the rest of it.
Okay.
Death is a given. That's what they will think. What could be so terrible that Jesus said in Matthew 24, verse 22, the first part of the verse? And except those days should be shortened, there should no flesh be saved. When you look the word saved up in the Greek section of the Strong's Concordance, it could mean spiritual or physical. And since this is talking about flesh being saved, it means being saved alive rather than everyone dying. So it's going to require a supernatural intervention by Jesus Christ to prevent this planet from dying. Everything on it. Scientists talk about a lost continent called Atlantis. The lost continents, did it really exist? None of us have been there.
Writing about it.
Could it be that nations have been destroyed before?
Wrote about it.
People remaining alive, but did not record the causes of the destruction and why their nation disappeared or a whole continent disappeared. A man by the name of Solon, S-O-L-O-N, who was a Greek historian. He was a philosopher and a statesman in Athens, Greece, between 639 and 559 B.C. He traveled to Egypt and interacted with the historians from Egypt in his day, because Egypt was the greatest nation at that time. It had detailed records, great libraries of things that happened in the past. He made notes and writings from the Egyptians' history books. On one such visit, the Egyptian priests, who were pagan, but still they have eyes, they can read, they can write and record history, told Solon the following concerning the demise of Atlantis and how there were recurring cataclysms that caused destructions from time to time. I will quote from the book Pole Shift, the section that he talked about here. You Greeks are but children. There is no old doctrine handed down among you, but by ancient traditions or any science, which is of age. I will tell you the reason behind this. There have been and will be again many destructions of mankind out of many causes. The greatest having been brought about by earth fire and inundation, that means flooding. Whereas you Greeks and other nations did not keep records, imperishable records of Atlantis. We Egyptians did. And then after a long period of time, the usual inundation or flooding visits the earth like a pestilence and leaves only those of you who are destitute of letters and education. So the society died, except for the few. And thus you have to begin over again as children, having no knowledge as time raced by that there were events that happened in the past that were very devastating to the human race, and know nothing of what happened in ancient times, either among us or among yourselves. End of quote. That was from John White's book, Pole Shift, page 38. In other words, what the ancient Egyptian priests were telling the Greeks historian at this time was that many civilizations throughout history of our planet have been wiped out by a recurring catastrophe, something that would come along ever so often. These civilization-ending cataclysms not only destroyed many ancient cultures that we're digging up and the artifacts from them that prove they existed, but they're written records and recorded history as well, forcing them literally to start over as children. As time went on, they would forget what caused the destruction. Recorded historians did not exist in many of these societies. So it is that these global cataclysms occurred, but many people scoffed because they didn't have the accurate information. Today I hope to give you some of the accurate information as to what this Bible prophecy that I've already read and many others, what it's all about. The Egyptians told Solon about the destroyed civilization called Atlantis. Atlantis was a series of islands that lay west of the Straits of Gibraltar, out into the Atlantic Ocean. Then the usual, as they said, inundation or flood struck the earth. It involved earthquakes and floods. They had a little warning. Atlantis was engulfed with ravages of the ocean. The waves overtook it. Huge tidal waves. Finally, Atlantis slipped between and under the great tidal waves, the giant waves, 3,000 feet in height, never to be seen or heard from again, but they lay deep under the oceans. In 1828, the Museum of Leiden in the Netherlands obtained a copy of a very old and ancient text known as Ipuwer, I-P-U-W-E-R, papyrus. And this was recorded in a book. This text describes a massive cataclysm that struck Egypt thousands of years ago. And they set forth a remarkable understanding of what has happened to many civilizations in the past in this papyrus. Statements from it reveal that the nation was totally devastated. Agriculture was destroyed. Both the upper and the lower Egyptian became wasteland. And we had the Great Sahara Desert as a direct result. Mr. A.H. Gardner wrote in a book concerning this particular papyrus that was in the Leiden Museum, quote, "It was no merely local disturbance that is here described, but a great and overwhelming national disaster," end of quote. Now, this ancient manuscript said that the earth turned upside down.
All right, John DiNardo. It's still playing here, John. Hold on just a second. This is pretty interesting, John. You know, I wrote about that event that he just described 40 years ago. And I'm just bringing that back out now.
Well, it's really, this is the ideal time to be bringing that information out, because that coincides with the events that we see beginning to ramp up on planet Earth right now over the last several years. At that time you brought it out 40 years ago, nobody was interested, but now they will be.
Yeah, and I've got 40 years of research to back up everything I started 40 years ago. So shall I go ahead and let this little clip finish?
Yeah, if you could start from the beginning of that, those voices that we just heard a few seconds ago, the introduction there.
Yeah, let's see here.
It's like maybe about a half a minute ago.
Okay, we just got a little musical interlude here. And, you know, all the signs are that what happened to Atlantis is happening now to us. Hang on.
Isn't that a pole shift? It said that the sky was in confusion. Why would the sky be in confusion? It was the earth that tilted on its axis, that was turned upside down and had a pole shift. Not the stars, not the sun, not the moon. They were constant as always. But it was from the perspective of human beings that the sky was in confusion. Could that have been referring to a time when the earth altered its rotation? We'll see it's recorded in history that it has happened. Whatever it was, it destroyed an entire nation, its cities, its agriculture, its infrastructure.
John?
Yes, Clay.
I wrote about this because, and the reason I wrote about it wasn't because I was psychic or anything necessarily, but I've read Velikovsky's Worlds in Collision, and that's actually the what I wrote. I wrote about the altering of the orbits of Mars and Venus, having them both come too close to Earth, and that same time period there. That's
Yes.
Go ahead. I'm
Well,
sorry.
yeah, this has happened in the past. When comets are drawn into our solar system, these comets, contrary to what the mass media has been giving you the deceptive or erroneous definition of comets, claiming that a comet is a dirty snowball, icy and dirt, that's absolutely false. They've proven this already, though. And they have with their high technology space probes, they have discovered that the comets are massive objects. And of course, they don't want to change the projected mainstream description of a comet because it's embarrassing for them to have to withdraw their definition and change it and admit that they were wrong. But it's becoming so obvious that they don't know how they're going to tell the public the fact that comets are really massive. Well, when these comets come in, and why would they come in? Well, let me explain to you from a very logical basis of physics. The natural laws of science that we see in operation every day of our lives. I'm a state certified to teach all of the sciences in the high schools of New Jersey, and I'm a former high school physics teacher. So I'll give you some basic physics principles that will clearly explain why this would be happening and why it is happening now that massive big bodies are being drawn into our solar system. It's all gravity. We see the principle of gravity in operation throughout our day, every day. And, when something falls off the edge of our table, goes through the edge of our table, it's going to fall to the ground because it is a gravitational force attraction between two masses. Everyone knows this. And that's why objects fall to the ground, and that's why we fall to the ground. Well, if you can imagine meteors that are captured in Earth's gravitational force field, will lay out in the fringes of, very weak fringes of Earth's gravitational force field. The meteors that come in are drawn in. Once they get even within the weak fringes of that force field, they're gradually drawn in by that pulling force and accelerated toward the Earth. Now, as we get closer to the Earth, Sir Isaac Newton's universal law of gravitation states that the force of attraction between the gravitational force of attraction between two bodies increases exponentially as the two bodies get closer together. So it's really a tremendous increase in the gravitational force as this asteroid begins to plunge toward Earth. And consequently, because of this increase in gravitational force, you have a commensurate increase in gravitational acceleration. So the asteroid or the meteor begins to accelerate tremendously until it's falling to Earth so fast that the friction of the inner piece of the asteroid or the meteor, and it begins to glow. The meteor begins to glow. And this is what we call shooting stars. Now, sometimes it gets so hot, the meteor gets so hot that it explodes before it hits the Earth. And that is a good thing, because then you do not have an impact. But if the meteor is large enough, it will strike the Earth. And now we're getting more and more bolide or bullet-like strikes from meteors upon. These are called, when a meteor hits the Earth, it's called a meteorite. And these are occurring much more frequently now. The reason is that when comets are drawn in gravitationally to our solar system, well, let me explain first of all, these are drawn in not by Earth, but by the huge, incredibly great gravitational force field of our sun. You see, our sun is estimated to have a mass of about 1/3 of a million. 1/3 of a million Earth masses. So can you imagine the mass of the Earth multiplied by 1/3 of a million, and that's the mass of the sun. So when objects come close to our solar system, they get sucked into Earth to our sun's gravitational force field, even if they're as far out as Pluto, and they get pulled in and they begin to accelerate, just as I described with the asteroid or meteor accelerating, getting caught in Earth's gravitational field and accelerating, plummeting toward Earth. Well, likewise, you have the same acceleration of comets coming in toward the sun. Now, it will accelerate, the comet will accelerate toward the larger body, and therefore it will not hit Earth. Its aimed, its focus, its rendezvous is with the sun. But it will pass by Earth, over the top of Earth, and over all the planets that are coming in on its way toward the sun. And when it gets overhead or even below the Earth, doesn't matter whether it's soaring above the Earth or soaring below the Earth, if it gets close enough, it's going to cause gravitational forces that will be absolutely devastating to Earth. These gravitational forces act like a masseuse would act on a person's skin. The forces pull and massage the Earth's crust. Not only the Earth's crust, but the underlying mantle of the Earth, which is very thick, viscous, molten rock, many, many miles deep, much thicker than Earth's crust. This molten, sort of visualize it as chocolate pudding beneath the crust of the Earth. And visualize the Earth's crust as the skin that might form on top of chocolate pudding. And you let it cool on the stove, you see the skin on top. I had gone to my library, my county library, and photocopied the New York Times articles and Washington Post articles and an article from the U.S. News and World Report, the third largest news magazine in the United States. Going by the government, we have evidence in the New York Times that the federal government of the United States actually announced that there's a huge brown dwarf star that is captured in our solar system's gravitational force field. That means it's on the outer fringes, as I was describing before, of the sun's gravitational force field, which means it is inevitable that this massive body, if it got caught in the fringes of the sun's gravitational field, is definitely going to be pulled in, and is definitely now being pulled in and accelerated toward the sun. And this happened many years ago, but it takes a long time because the solar system is incredibly vast. So it takes many years for this object to accelerate toward the sun. Well, with the article I'm going to read to you, I actually photocopied it. You can get this is proof. I mean, it's the article itself. It's not a transcript. It's a photocopy of the New York Times article. Sunday, January 30th, 1983. The New York Times title: Clues Get Warm in the Search for Planet X. Now, here you have the New York Times using the term Planet X many, many years ago. So anybody, any person who is unenlightened should realize that this is not a false term, Planet X. It sounds like a cheap science fiction movie. It's indeed the name that astronomers and scientists have given to this celestial body that they have discovered. Now, read the article in the New York Times: Clues Get Warm in the Search for Planet X by John Noble Wilford. Quote: Something out there beyond the farthest reaches of the known solar system seems to be tugging at Uranus and Neptune. Some gravitational force keeps perturbing the two giant planets, causing irregularities in their orbits. The force suggests a presence far away and unseen, a large object that may be the long-sought Planet X. Evidence assembled in recent years has led several groups of astronomers to renew the search for the 10th planet. They are devoting more time to visual observations with a 200-inch telescope at Mount Palomar in California. They are tracking two Pioneer spacecraft, and incidentally, we now know that these two Pioneer spacecraft have indeed detected gravitational pull from Planet X, and that's why the two Pioneer spacecraft were sent up to go to the deepest reaches of our solar system and out into deep space, because one of them was sent out near where they calculated Planet X to be by its gravitational pull. So they sent out this Pioneer 10 spacecraft to see if the spacecraft would be pulled off of its trajectory by this unseen but felt gravitational force. And indeed, it was felt. So they proved by the Pioneer spacecraft that it was there. I'll go back to the article. They're tracking two Pioneer spacecraft now approaching the orbit of distant Pluto. See if variations in their trajectories provide clues to the source of this mysterious force. And they are hoping that a satellite-borne telescope launched just last week will detect heat signatures from this planet, or whatever it is out there. The Infrared Astronomical Satellite, that's IRAS, was boosted to a 560-mile-high polar orbit Tuesday night from Vandenberg Air Force Base, California. It's represents an $80 million venture by the United States, Britain, and the Netherlands. In the next 6 or 7 months, this telescope is expected to conduct a wide-ranging survey of nearly all the sky, detecting sources not of ordinary light, but of infrared radiation, which is invisible to the human eye and largely absorbed by the atmosphere. Scientists thus hope that the new telescope will chart thousands of infrared emitting objects that have gone undetected: stars, interstellar clouds, asteroids, and with any luck, this object that pulls at Uranus and Neptune. Well, anyway, I'll break off that article, and here we go. We're going to fast forward 11 months into the future, from January 30th, 1983 to December 30th, 1983. I've got the article right here. Washington Post. Again, I photocopied this article. So there's proof. It's not a transcript. It's the actual photocopy from my library archive. Washington Post, December 30th, 1983. Front page. Headline. Mystery Heavenly Body Discovered, possibly as large as Jupiter. By Thomas O'Toole, Washington Post staff writer. Quote, a heavenly body possibly as large as the giant planet Jupiter, and possibly so close to Earth that it would be part of this solar system, has been found in the direction of the constellation Orion by an orbiting telescope aboard the U.S. infrared astronomical satellite. So mysterious is the object that astronomers do not know if it is a planet, a giant comet, a nearby protostar. Now, a protostar would be a brown dwarf star, or a star that is beginning to form. Sorry, a star that's in the early formation stages.
Now, I have a hard time. I have a hard time believing with the Hubble with the Hubble telescope out there that they can't really identify it. I mean, why are they saying this? It's,
well, you're right. You're right. I mean, this is part of the cover-up. Cover-up started from the National Security Administration, which is the head of all the spy agencies in the United States government, in our covert government, you should call it.
Okay, John. My guest is John DiNardo, who has been doing all of the research on Planet X ever since, and I started covering the story of Planet X. So this brown dwarf star could be Planet X, or it could be still on its way. It's still, has anybody independently of NASA been able to identify this? And also, this would explain, I believe, that 10,000 years ago, 6,000 years ago, the pyramids and that type of structure was built to withstand exactly what you've been describing: a planetary crossing, a shift, a polar shift, a rotation shift. The sun used to rise in the west, didn't it, John?
Right. In fact, that is a part of David J. Smith's man you just heard before in the recording, where he cites ancient historical records from various civilizations, and these were some books written by scholars that he has referred to. He cited the books and the names of the authors. And he described how various civilizations have stated that the sun used to rise in the west and set in the east. It had changed its direction of rotation. Now, we can relate this to basic physics, and it's very useful to visualize a child's top. I hope people here are not too young to know what a spinning top is, because a lot of times, children don't get spinning tops anymore for Christmas. But you can visualize it like a gyroscope. It looks like an apple or a ball that spins at such a high speed, so that it remains erect and doesn't topple over. That's the principle of a gyroscope. Well, that's the way Earth rotates at a speed that's fast enough to keep it erect. It's not perfect because there is a tilt to the Earth on its axis. We know that. But essentially, it's not, there is a wobble to Earth also. It's a slight wobble, but it's not a wobble that would be strong enough or accentuated enough to cause disaster.
John, if the government is aware that this is coming, that this is going to happen, and it's probably all of the predictions, all the signs are it's happening now and it's happening this year. We've had an increase in earthquakes, we've had an increase in volcanoes, we've got an increase in just about. But they have spent a lot of money in a lot of countries building underground shelters, underground cities, and that's so an elite few can survive, and the other a few billion people can be just taken out.
That's right, and they'll tell you, and it's true that the underground cities also have are prepared for another emergency, and that is nuclear war. But they started building these underground cities. They've got, according to Phil Schneider, who was murdered. This information was so tightly secretive that they actually murdered a courageous, patriotic man, Philip Schneider, who was a high-level geologist working for the U.S. government and excavating these underground cities. And he began to give speeches about the existence of these underground cities. Well, according to Phil Schneider, there were 129 underground cities all over the world, and that ends up about 15 years ago. And many of them are very deep, they're huge, they've taken billions and trillions of dollars from our tax money to build these underground cities. And other countries have done the same. Russia, even the Vatican, I've heard that the Vatican has an underground city in the Italian Alps. And of course, you would expect it to be in underneath a mountain, just as one of the major underground cities in the United States is under a mountain, Cheyenne, in the bowels of Cheyenne Mountain in Colorado, near Denver, I believe. And even under the Denver airport, there is some kind of underground city. The airport was built far from the city. There seems to be no reason why, from what Governor Jesse Ventura has mentioned, there seems to be no reason why they would have constructed this Denver airport so far away from the major city. But they went through it, and they had a true TV special with Jesse Ventura, Conspiracy Theory, about 2 years ago. I put it on high-quality DVD. I have it recorded. And you can get it all over YouTube. Just go to YouTube, type in Jesse Ventura Apocalypse 2012. Well, he shows these huge rectangular-shaped tunnels, concrete tunnel conduit. It's sort of like a huge concrete structure, and it's large enough, probably about 20 feet by 20 feet wide and 15 feet high. And they were laying on top of the ground in the airport area. And he was driving through and photographing them, and he said those are definitely going to be used for underground tunnels. Well, Phil Schneider did describe in his book, the book that Marshall Masters had published, Planet X Forecast in 2012, Survival Guide by Marshall Masters. Phil Schneider's testimony is in there that they have underground, I guess it's nuclear-powered underground tunneling machines that can, they dig a tunnel 28 feet wide by 20 feet high, I think it is, and it's so hot that it actually melts the rock underneath and it causes the rock to the surface of the tunnel to become smooth like glass. And they can progress at 7 miles of digging, 7-mile tunnels per day with these machines. And many of these tunnels are interconnected. Well, bottom line is they're going underground. They know all about it. Jesse Ventura and his producer, Michael Sprakerman, spoke to the chief of security, Colonel Wynn, down underneath the Cheyenne Mountain. And he asked Colonel Wynn, when the disasters occur on Earth and the people of Colorado start streaming down to go underground for protection, will they be able to get into this underground city? And Colonel Wynn replied, when those steel blast doors are closed, you can knock all day long. They're not getting in. And he has highly trained military personnel there to protect that city at whatever cost, even if it means shooting Americans who may be trying to get in. Well, there's the story of what the elite are doing. They're getting ready to go underground. They know this is happening. And one of the reasons, I'm sure, why they're racing at such a frantic pace to institute their global dictatorship, just seizing all kinds of power so abruptly and shockingly, is because they know that the disasters are about to accelerate. They have the control of NASA and all the space probes and the space telescopes, and they see these objects coming. They are not about to tell us about it. They figure, well, it'll be a wonderful depopulation method to just allow everybody to be killed, so that they can achieve their stated purpose, which is engraved in stone, the Georgia Guidestone. Their stated purpose, engraved in stone, is to exterminate 12 out of every 13 people on planet Earth, leaving 500 million people remaining on Earth.
That would that would be 499 million slaves and 1 million elite.
That's right. They need their slaves. And so this would be a way to exterminate the people, just let them be killed by the natural disasters. And the major disasters that I see coming are the windstorms, which are just horrific. I mean, super tornadoes we're seeing super hurricanes, super straight line windstorms, and but the major threat that I see coming very soon, and we could all see it, and it's not only me, it's the government that has stated it, the National Academy of Sciences, which is the most esteemed scientific organization in the government of the United States. The National Academy of Sciences claims that the solar excitation, solar flares, and solar mass ejections in 2012 and 2013 will be tremendous, so strong that they will take out the power grid, so that will be the entire globe, or much of the globe will be without power. But what also happens with these tremendous solar storms, which are not only heat intensified, but also electric particles are blasted from the sun toward the earth, people will be burned, singed, and also afflicted by X-rays emitted by the sun. So there's all kinds of radiation, X-radiation, there's heat, infrared, everything is going to cause tremendous death and destruction to people living on the surface when these solar flares occur. But the very first thing is probably, the least of it would be the destruction of the power grids, according to the National Academy of Sciences. And this has happened already, so we can look back in history and say, wow, this is no longer theoretical. This has actually happened in 1859. Fortunately, all they had back in 1859 were telegraph wires. And they got burnt from tremendous solar activity back then. But now we've got such a sensitive electronic and power infrastructure that everything will be destroyed, including the equipment that's connected to the power line. And computer systems will be damaged. And as we all know, you don't get food in your supermarket anymore without a complex network of computers and delivery systems and all that. Well, that gets, when the computer systems go down, you don't have anything really. You don't have food production, you don't have food distribution, and then the earthquakes which are occurring, and look at the destruction or the breakup of the nation's thoroughfares and highways as a result of these storms.
Now,
as a result of the tornadoes, you can't get through with all the debris.
Edgar Casey told us that we would have an inland sea where the Mississippi River is.
Yeah, Edgar Casey, he was not a guy who consciously dreamed up these ideas. He would go into a trance, and mainly his purpose was not even to foretell the future of the earth. His purpose was to heal people. And he indeed has records that are at the archives at the Association for Research and Enlightenment in Virginia Beach, Virginia. It's an entire library that has records of his healing. He would go into a trance, and without ever seeing the patient, who lived many miles away most of the time, he would, in an unconscious state, describe what was wrong with the person and what could be used to heal them. And there were doctors trying to go to Edgar Casey to get diagnoses of their patients. That's how reliable he was. And his son, Hugh Lynn Casey, said they would have trucks coming to Casey's house. When he was a boy, Hugh Lynn Casey would see these trucks coming in with mail loaded, and people were begging him for readings, what he called unconscious psychic readings, as to the cure for some ailment that these letter writers had.
What did he say about the coming disaster, or Planet X, or this inland sea? What did he have to say about that?
Well, in his readings, these ideas would come, and I know they're from a supernatural power. We all know they're supernatural. These messages from God. What they said was, some of the things that slipped out in some of his medical readings were that, quote, the greater portion of Japan must go into the sea. He also said that California, San Francisco, Los Angeles, both of these must be destroyed before New York. So he's saying all three of those cities will be destroyed by cataclysms. He said what is now the coastland of many a nation will become the bed of the ocean. What else did he say? He said that when you see, and this is a very important thing for people to remember, because if you live on the West Coast, you need to remember this and look into it and keep your eyes open. Edgar Casey said when you see the eruption of either Mount Vesuvius in Italy, or Mount Pelée in the Lesser Antilles, either Mount Vesuvius or Mount Pelée, then about 3 months thereafter, you'll see the major earthquakes of the West Coast, all the way from the West Coast up to Nevada. Huge megaquakes. So watch for those eruptions of either Mount Vesuvius or Mount Pelée, P-E-L-E-E.
Where's that located? Where's Pelée located?
Well, Pelée is on, I believe, on one of the islands in the Lesser Antilles, which is like north of the eastern shoulder of South America. There's a chain of islands that runs north and south called the Lesser Antilles. And I think it might be in St. Lucia, or one of those islands. But you could look up P-E-L-E-E, Mount Pelée. And I'm watching myself. I got to remember to keep watching for those eruptions. Oh, and I'm going to tell you something else. It's amazing. When you're a scientist, I always had this belief in science and never strayed from the real physical world to the supernatural, because I never believed that there could be anything supernatural when I was, younger. Well, I've seen so much evidence now to prove that supernatural prophecies indeed exist, and they are accurate. Not only in the Bible, where they prophesy things that are happening today, but also by men like the Hopi Indians and psychics throughout the world. Nostradamus predicted that there would be a pole shift, that the earth would actually rotate vertically And God predicted this in the book of Isaiah around 550 BC, in Isaiah chapter 24. And if you look at, I'm going to give you the exact Hebrew to English definition, which was butchered by the King James translators. And I'm just going to give you verse 20. Isaiah chapter 24, verse 20. The earth shall reel to and fro like a drunkard, and shall nod like a hammock, and it shall fall and not rise again. Well, you put a globe, take a model globe of the earth and put it into the bed of your backyard hammock, and then pull the hammock back and get it ready to swing. You can visualize what would happen to the globe when the hammock is in a state of equilibrium in the center. The North Pole is pointing upward. But when you pull the hammock back to allow it to swing, then the North Pole rotates vertically downward, so that the North Pole goes where the equator is, and the equator goes where the South Pole and North Pole are. And that's what the Bible is saying, that the earth will nod. A nod is always a vertical rotation, like you nod your head to indicate yes, not a horizontal rotation. So that's very clear what the Bible says. There'll be a vertical pole shift. Now, this is also stated by Nostradamus, who didn't even know about the Bible. He predicted this in his quatrains, and then you have Edgar Casey, of course. Oh, it's one of his major quotes. Edgar Casey said that the poles of the earth will shift, such that what was once the tropical zone will become the more frigid zone. So what does that mean? Well, the only way to make a tropical zone become frigid is to rotate the earth vertically so that, let's say, Ecuador goes to the North Pole, and the North Pole goes down to the tropical zone.
John, haven't the poles already shifted? Haven't they found a little bit of movement from the poles? That the North Pole has actually shifted a few miles.
Well, you have to distinguish between the two kinds of poles. There's the geographic pole, and then there's the magnetic pole. The magnetic pole of the Earth, first of all, has indeed shifted tremendously, 50 miles, as you say, in just a few years. And the scientists tell us that this is a very dramatic and abnormal shift of the Earth's magnetic poles. In fact, the shift has caused problems with aviation. And if you look it up, you'll find out. You should be finding even more and more news articles on the internet about aviation problems, navigation problems, due to the shifting of the poles. And I spoke with a guy who worked at, I'll get back to the geographical shift in a minute, but I spoke to a guy and he was in this kind of field, and I still have his number, but he told me that indeed in Alaska they're having trouble with aircraft flight, aircraft navigation, because of this magnetic anomalies that are occurring with the Earth's magnetic field. And you're right, the magnetic field of the Earth is getting screwed up. Also, if you look at the jet stream, go to the Weather Channel or go on the internet and look for the jet stream that is depicted wrapping around the Earth and going over the United States on the weather map. That's a very important type of display to watch on a daily basis. I've been watching it videotaping it now ever since 2004. And I've seen the jet stream go from what used to be, now going back several decades, what used to be a very smooth horizontal line, which is called the jet stream, and that's where the fronts come down from Canada. Above this line, which is basically it's a wind kind of a stream high up in the atmosphere. And above that line of wind, normally the cold air stays there up in Canada. And south of that line, that jet stream line, the warm air remains. So everything is fine. You have moderate days without a lot of moderate temperatures, without any kind of extreme abnormality or turbulence in the atmosphere. But when a jet stream goes from what used to be a horizontal line, and you can visualize it as sort of like a line that would demarcate the U.S.-Canadian border, so to speak. Okay, that's what the jet stream used to look like about 30 years ago. Today, it looks like a capital W. Now, from 2004 to 2009, the jet stream looked like a capital W on the Weather Channel. The peak of the W was up a little bit above the U.S.-Canadian border, and the trough of the W was somewhere down in Arizona, at that latitude, Texas, Louisiana, that latitude. And the jet stream would roll from west to east, from they call it
Discover what's really going on in the world.
Okay, hold on a second here.
Mainstream media won't tell you.
All right.
Okay. Well,
Good.
now that W has gotten more accentuated, huge, and it's becoming very worrisome. But getting back to the geographic pole shift, that's a different kind of pole shift, where the crust of the Earth actually rotates. The Earth itself rotates, and that causes global destruction. That has not happened yet. Now, the wobbling seems to have increased some more. I'm not sure. I have to do more research. I believe the wobbling of the Earth, and they call it the Chandler wobble, C-H-A-N-D-L-E-R, wobble. We have to go to the internet and check the latest undulations of the Chandler wobble to see if the Earth indeed is